I don't know about you, but I feel like the talks keep getting better and better. And I'm very excited to invite Gurman to the stage. Hi,
Hello.
how are you doing?
I am great. It's been I'm attending an online conference after a while, so it's been really nice to see people, and so yeah, having fun.
Yeah, it's evening for you, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so let's take another about 20 minutes, a little bit less, to chat through the questions. And after that, I also encourage you to take a look at the chat because there have been a lot of positive comments on your talk, and people are really inspired by what you do. So, are you ready to jump right into the questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. Number one, do photos inspire a different level of trust in the information, providing evidence of some sorts?
Yes, I do agree. Like, I think the Dollar Street project is quite interesting in that sense because part of your data, you're doing the survey where you're asking people questions, but part of the data collection is also clicking these photographs. And sometimes when you put things in a spreadsheet, information gets lost, and photographs might capture. Some more emotion, some background details that you might otherwise miss. So I guess like it makes it also much more real. When I see someone's hands and I see someone's teeth and I see someone's bed and where they sleep, I guess like you're also connecting with people more, because it's much more real. So anything that is like that ends up gathering more trust as well.
Okay. So, is there a way you could use photos to display a lack of data?
um, Lack of data, I guess, like empty space in general. When we capture empty spaces in other design aspects, it ends up being something like that. So why not here as well? Empty space could be one way to do it. um, I guess like even the books example, right? Like where somebody had read books and somebody had not read books, and simply turning the book around ended up being like a negative aspect. So I guess like, positive negatives can work with. You can think of different ways to work with positive and negative aspects as well. You could blur images. Another way, if you don't have information, you can blur faces to show that something's there, but I just don't know what. Just thinking out loud. I've never done it myself.
Yeah, those Outlier attendees are asking difficult questions, aren't they? So, a similar question, or sort of related to that, how can we use photo focused data viz, like the ones you showed in examples, to perhaps address data literacy gaps?
So when we did the pollution piece, for example, what we ended up doing was we had photographs and we paired the photographs with a line chart. So what you have done is the photo is the more visceral way, but instead of removing the technical line chart altogether, you have paired the two. So the person can then connect that this point in the line, oh, looks like that. So I think pairing photo viz with numbers and putting the two together can be a great way in putting more data driven information in a relatable manner. So, yeah, like 100%. Like, for example, even for people like my parents who don't consume charts on a daily basis, when I show that piece, you get like, oh my God, that moment of, oh, it's that bad, which a normal typical line chart would not do. So it's ending up making someone stop a little bit and, okay, try and understand what's happening. So yeah, it does help in data literacy in that sense.
Very interesting and very powerful. So, for all of these projects, how do you go about collecting the photos? For example, all the pictures you showed for the Indian election piece.
Hmm. So that one, thankfully, the government did the job for me. So, it is actually pretty interesting how photographs for that was collected. So there was another story that I did in the previous elections, which was about dummy candidates. So what ends up happening is, so if one Gurman party is contesting from a seat, the opposition party might pay three other Gurman parties to contest from the same seat to confuse voters. So that used to happen. And in order to combat that, the government said what we're going to do is we're going to put a picture of the person on the ballot. Okay, that means more data. So the government started collecting these faces as a database that they would then put on the ballot. But then we started approaching that now that we have these faces, what can we do with it? So it was like, okay, there's this new data point that's going to be available. Let's ideate around it, and that's how it came to be. And then yeah, I scraped a government website to collect those faces, and because I was merging data sets, I like did lots and lots of checks to make sure in the tree map the wrong person does not end up with the wrong number
Hmm.
in any scenario. So that was a little anxiety
Hmm.
inducing, but yeah.
I wonder if the person who asked this question is also thinking about copyrights and things like that. So I don't know if you have tips for people who are working on projects where government doesn't provide the pictures. Maybe some websites or just some general tips on how to make sure that they're doing this appropriately.
So this one, of course, like copyright is 100% a big concern in this scenario, because it was public data. It was something that it was officially put out by the government. You could use for the pollution piece. We set up our own camera and we collected our own data. So yes, please do think about copyright. One way of it could be that you put automate the data collection. Another thing could be that maybe they're private agencies as well. So for example, satellite imagery, if you work in a news outlet, most likely if you get in touch with Planet, Maxar, like all these uh, companies that collect granular data, if you ask them that, I'm a news organization, I want to tell these stories, can you please help me access? So people often use images in that format. A lot of these projects are also highly personal.
Hmm.
So, for example, the Tinder project, somebody is just screenshotting every match. The same person has, I didn't get the time to include that project, but the same person also has a project where he looked at all the screenshots, like basically how often does the person change windows to show our the lack of our attention span. So every
Hmm.
time
So
he switched the window,
many,
he
so
switched the
many
window,
times.
he took a screenshot, and then he, like, stacked all the screenshots to show how often one was shifting. So, like, which is a very personal
Hmm.
project. So is the Tinder project. So I guess, like, if like we had a super inspiring personal project talk just before me. So I guess, like, it could also be that you're collecting your own data. Most of the projects that you will see, people will be collecting their own data,
Hmm.
and few would be where it's public institutions putting out
Hmm.
photographs.
Okay, so we spoke a bit about copyright and everything related to that. Are there any other pitfalls that you would suggest people watch out for when using photovis versus other mediums?
Like, one thing that I think a little bit about, one thing that I struggle with when I think about this is dealing with screen readers, and the whole accessibility question. So of course, it's a more as with like most creative forms of visualization, you are compromising on accessibility. So the maximum you're going to do is you're going to put up descriptions on a screen reader. So, and none of the projects that I've talked about actually are highly accessible. So gap, for example, in Gapminder, if I ended up writing good quality alt text for all the photographs that I put out there, it would be almost the equivalent of writing a book.
Hmm.
So, you know, th- to keep that in mind, that you're losing out something in the process, I think is something to be mindful of. I myself have started thinking about this only in the past 1 year. So none of the projects that I worked on are, you know, would work on screen readers as well.
Hmm.
So I think that is one of the biggest pitfalls. But I guess, like all innovative solutions, we need to think of something to pass that hurdle. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting and important and difficult topic indeed. We will have a talk by Doug, I believe it's tomorrow, on accessibility and cognitive load as well, in case you want to. Everyone wants
But
to check it out,
but
actually.
but while it sorry to
Go
interrupt, but
ahead, go
just to
ahead.
add to that, but like while it restricts people who are on screen readers, at the same time there is the aspect where you're making things more relatable.
Hmm.
So it's more friendly towards people with other limitations, you know. So because I am putting photographs instead of like color categories, and you know, so the other things that we look at when we are talking about
Hmm.
accessibility, I think photoviz captures those aspects quite well,
Hmm.
but is like highly limited on people who are using screen readers.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not an easy trade-off. So staying on the topic of cognitive load and things related, I have a bit of a long question. So as photographs are clearly more texture rich and detailed with respect to common symbols and graphics that we use in traditional data viz, do you think that this could represent some sort of an issue or maybe even a side effect related to cluttering and cognitive overload?
Now, that depends on how you use it, right? So sometimes I think overload can be a good thing. So, because if the idea and the purpose of the whiz that I'm creating is to overwhelm the reader, so for example, in the politician's example, uh, you have to scroll a lot. And you have to scroll a lot by design. It is to the scrolling communicates the scale. So because I so you know there's a message in the cognitive load as well.
Hmm.
And like of all the faces and all the color on the page, it's a very very colorful page. So you one could say that it's extremely overwhelming and everything else. Why aren't the colors muted? Why isn't it black and white? Why isn't it one hue? You can
Hmm.
think about all those things, but it is like that by design, because the goal is to overwhelm you, to show you just how humongous this election is, just the
Hmm.
scale of the elections, and also to annoy you with all the scroll to get to that first woman candidate. It's like that by design. So
Hmm.
I think in some scenarios, depends on the use case. Um, the overwhelming nature of something can help. It can There can be a message in it as well. And otherwise I think depends on how you design it. There are ways to still design photoviz very, you know, clearly.
Hmm.
The pollution, oh sorry, not the pollution, the plastic microplastic example from my colleagues at Reuters, that one, it's a beautiful, those are pictures are extremely beautiful. There's white cutlery and there is colored plastic, and that's it. And you know there is a way to do it without that cognitive overload as well.
Hmm.
So I guess like that's a design problem that one can solve. And in scenarios, you can, you know, also use it to your benefit to communicate something additional.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, okay. We have 3 minutes left. Do you think we can do two more questions maybe before
Fingers
we
crossed.
go to break? In my work in the media field, I have been pushing our data viz more towards combination of graphics and photographs. Unfortunately, my editor is strictly against it. They only trust old school graphics. How could I change their mind?
I don't know. My
What's your magic
editor,
wand?
I think like one thing, as someone who has been in a newsroom, one thing that I did a lot whenever my editor did not agree with them. It's not a very viable thing to do, but it mostly worked. So when I disagree with them, I would so basically they say do it this way, and I say no, I want to do it that way, and they're like no, 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 do it my way. So I would do it their way, but I would also do it my way, and I'll show the
Hmm.
both. And when they see it, sometimes it helps them. It helps them get to the
Hmm.
other side. So sometimes I think like instead of get discussing, just like showing a sample, showing a prototype helps. Convincing people, in convincing people. um, if you're in a media organization, other way could be to also get photographers on board. Fortunately, like when I work at Reuters, the Reuters photo team is also a very, very strong team. So all the camera setup, everything was done by a photographer. The graphics team did like the ideation and the stitching, but all the effort of setting up a room and everything was done by a photographer. So I think finding other collaborators in the newsroom that might be on board and is another way to go about this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I think those are very useful tips. So, one final question. My database instructor told me that the images should be in the background. I didn't agree. What's your take on this?
Depends on the viz, I guess. In some, really depends on what you're trying to make. In some cases, yes, it can clutter, and like of course the whole debate around chart junk and not, like, which is a very political thing in the database community. I am not against images in charts. I My stance has shifted over time. I think like I've become a lot more pro creative viz, but there's a way to do it. And
Hmm.
it's good to experiment. I think, like, you can fight with your instructors all you want, and there are these rules, but sometimes rules should be broken. If you don't break rules, there won't be any innovation. So but there is a way to break rules, so please experiment and you'll eventually get there.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insights. It was really, really nice to have you here and chat with you. Like everyone else, do check the talk notes. You can insert more links. People in the chat have been asking for more work for some people that you mentioned. So do that, and I hope to see you around during the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.